I've had the suspicion now for some time that business owners are being taken for a ride. And now I think I've got the evidence. So if you're a business owner, you most likely have at some point looked for funding or getting a business loan, asset finance, all that type of thing, where you speak with a finance broker or finance house to get funding. And I'm generally talking about outside of your typical high street bank here. And what happens is, and what I'm seeing and what I'll get to is it goes very quickly from being or feeling like it's a consultative experience or that you're being advised different products to the point where you're actually being sold to. And finance brokering is a profession. It shouldn't feel like you are being sold double glazing. No offense to any double glazing salesmen out there. I'm sure there's some very reputable double glazing salespeople, but you get the idea. So if a finance broker offers a loan before they've properly conducted a questionnaire with you or found out what the purpose of the loan is for, there's a good sign there that that product isn't necessarily best serving you, and it might be best serving them. I've seen businesses offered loans when asset finance would be much more appropriate when buying things like machinery, for example. So I'm going to share with you the 3 warning signs and the one important question that you can ask to establish whether the product that you're being offered best suits you or the finance broker. But before I get to that, I just want to tell you a short story and just give you a bit of context to this, because I speak with lots of different business owners all the time. So I'm in some interesting rooms, and what I've found recently is that loans are being offered instead of asset finance. And you might think, well, why is that an issue? Well, I had a client come to me last week, actually, in fact, and he said to me that he was looking for a £60,000 loan. And the only reason it came to me was that he'd been given some advice to take a loan out, and he just felt it didn't feel quite right, and he also felt it was a bit expensive. So we had a little look, and it turned out he was buying an excavator from somebody that he knew who had a very similar business and was getting a new one. So it was what we call a B2B sale. It wasn't a directly from supplier purchase. And as I say, the other finance broker that he'd spoken to had offered him a loan. So on the face of it, that isn't the right product necessarily for that type of purchase. And the reason for that is that an asset finance loan is very different to a business loan. A business loan is an unsecured loan, but normally with a personal guarantee from a director that can be very quickly input into your business, and then you can use the cash to go and spend it on for whatever you've planned. But the reason that asset finance is better in this situation most of the time is that it's secured against the asset. So when it being secured against the asset, quite often the bank will give you a slightly better deal. They don't always need a personal guarantee from you, but it does require more work from somebody like me or the finance broker that's dealing with it. And this is my suspicion of why people are being advised these loans instead of asset finance, because not only can it sometimes make the broker more money when they have a business loan, but it's also just a lot quicker and a lot easier to get done. They just put a single application in, get the funding, and it's done. But as I say, it doesn't, and also actually they won't necessarily need to do things like an asset inspection. The paperwork they raise is less onerous on the broker. So, and I'm not saying all brokers are doing this, but it does sound like lazy brokering, and that isn't what you want when you're going to get finance. The other thing as well is loan stacking as well that I keep seeing. So one loan in itself is fine, but people keep going and getting loans when they could be getting asset finance, and before they know it, they've got this personal guarantee exposure that outweighs any equity they've got, and they're at high risk of bankruptcy. So that's a whole nother story. So I said I've got more evidence now, and the reason is that I've got that evidence is that I've been speaking to a couple of people on high authority that this discussion is now being had in very high places, and it's a big concern. So something that's going to be talked about a lot more in my industry. But the important bit, what can you do about it? Well, there's three things. First of all, if a finance broker offers you a product before they've asked you what the loan purpose is for, run a mile. That means they are purely just trying to sell you a loan. Second, if they don't give you indicative figures at least, now, not everybody knows exact figures that you're going to get on a loan, but if they don't even give you indicative figures ahead, or at least tell you how they came about that pricing, again, I would get a second opinion, because we all have a rough estimate on what we can get in terms of a finance deal, and you should be able to articulate that clearly and give you a best and worst case scenario when looking for a business loan, and particularly in asset finance. Normally the pricing is a lot more structured, so it's much easier to tell you exactly what you're going to get. But even with business loans, some lenders have fixed pricing models, so they should be able to evidence exactly why they've priced it that way and how much you'll be paying. Finally, ask this question: what products have you considered before offering me this final solution, and why have you come to that final conclusion to offer me that product? If a finance broker cannot answer that question to you clearly, get a second opinion, because if your gut's telling you that you're being sold to and you're not being advised, there are plenty of other really good finance brokers out there, and it would be my advice to just go and get a second opinion and just check that you're getting looked after. In a future video, I'm actually going to show you how much commission finance brokers actually make, so watch out for that.